What's up, you wonderful people? Welcome back to another episode of Transcending Explorations. Thank you all for being here. As always, it means the absolute world to me. It is so greatly appreciated, even if one person listens to this podcast. But I know more than one people listen to this podcast, so I hope all of you that listen to this podcast really do get and extract high quality value from all of these shows, and that it does directly contribute to the quality of your life, and that you do learn things and you gain some insights and you take on, the information and integrate it into your life and see the changes. And, if it does any of those things, appreciate the likes, the ratings, the reviews. This will forever be helpful in the podcasting space. And if you're feeling ambitious, then the value for value model is also there for you, as most of you would probably know by now. If you want to directly contribute to the podcast, be a co-producer, co-creator, and actualize the value you perceived you received from these episodes and show in general, then there's a link in the description to that you can check out. And hope you're all doing well and wonderful during this roller coaster of a journey we are on, with the pulsations of the intensity in and out. I hope you're enjoying it. I hope you're really simply just enjoying the ride, which it's actually fitting that I say that, considering today's episode, and that's actually something we do get into towards the end. I didn't even think about that as I opened up the podcast. And it's just such a hardwired way of how I see reality, which is like a roller coaster journey. There's ups and downs, there's twists and turns, but ultimately it's up to us how we choose to perceive the experience. And so I'm going to control what I can, which is my perception of this whole thing. And I'm not going to go on a long rabbit hole into that, because we do talk about that a little bit in today's episode, which was with the magnificent, incredible, beautiful Ben Calder. We had the man himself back on for a third appearance, because he is just full of amazing perspectives and knowledge that I personally want to squeeze out of him, and for you guys to hear all what he has to share as well. And so today we used an integral framework. If you want to know more about Ben, if you haven't listened to the first two episodes we've done, go back and listen to them. But we used an integral framework in waking up, cleaning up, growing up, and showing up. This is such a full and comprehensive framework for a human being to really consciously take themselves through, to evolve in all areas. As you can see, we're not neglecting, and these do extend beyond just waking up. We could look at this in the quadrants, from the quadrants perspective being I, we, it, and it, waking up in I, waking up in we, waking up in it, waking up in its. And so it is very multi-dimensional, and it's also synergistic in that they all influence each other. They're all tied into each other. They all, as Ben would say, tetra arise simultaneously, all together. So you can't work on one without influencing all of them. And so Ben and I just openly explored these stages of development, what they mean, the multiple different perspectives we can take on it, and then the actionable side of things in what does it actually look like to wake up? How do we wake up? How do we clean up? How do we grow up? And then what does showing up look like? Giving you a full look, a full picture at how a human being can really evolve, not in just one area, but in so many different areas. Again, this is just only one framework. The whole integral model in itself is, so comprehensive, balanced, and whole. Just the definition of integral, which is really what I hope this conversation and exploration is for you guys today. It's comprehensive, it's balanced, and it's whole, and that you're inspired to look more into waking up, cleaning up, and growing up, showing up, and actually taking yourself consciously through these stages of development in your own life so you become a more whole, balanced, and integrated individual, which influences all of us, as we know. Entanglement. So that's today's episode. Hope you love it. Hope you get a ton of juicy information out of it. Again, if you do, appreciate the likes, ratings, reviews, and all of that good stuff that you know what to do. I love you guys. Thank you for the support, and enjoy this episode with Ben Calder. Ben Calder, welcome back yet again to Transcending Explorations, mate. So good to have you on for the third time. Just been loving connecting with you and having you on the show, and look forward to what we get into today. But welcome back to the show, mate.
Lachlan, thank you so much. It's a real honour to be here, and honestly, third time as well. I really do. I feel honoured that you've kept coming back for more. It's a real testament to how just beautiful and juicy our conversations have been over the last couple of recordings as well.
Absolutely, and selfishly, you're like a sponge, just full of wisdom, and I want to somewhat wring all that juicy wisdom and knowledge and information that you have for myself to absorb, but obviously for other listeners to absorb as well. So I hope that they have loved the other two episodes that we have done on health and spirituality. So people, if you haven't listened to that, check them out. Today, we're going to be using or going through a framework and it was Dustin DePerna who really introduced this to the integral theory, right? And this is wake up, grow up, cleaning up, and showing up. But just to confirm, it was Dustin DePerna, right?
I don't remember offhand because it's also expanded even in the time that I've been looking at it. We always had, or I was always aware of waking up and growing up, which was when Ken and Alan Coombs introduced the Wilbur-Coombs lattice. We kind of differentiated at that point between the growing up through the stages of development and the waking up through the states of consciousness.
Okay, yeah. And then obviously it sounds like Dustin has brought in that clean up and show up aspect. Yeah, interesting. So yeah, what I thought we would do is we would just dialogue a little bit about each one. Obviously, they're all connected and synergistic. So by working on one, you influence all of them like a spider web. You can't touch one strand without influencing the whole entire web. But I think this is just such a very valuable framework for one to be aware of and to kind of consciously take themselves through, especially in this transformational time that we're going through. I think people really need to learn how to truly wake up, how to clean up. This one's incredible. They're all incredibly important, but I think clean up needs a little bit of emphasis. We definitely need to grow up, and then the showing up as well. So let's just start with getting an understanding and an overview of, from your perspective, what is waking up? Let's just start with that.
I think that my favorite thing to share about waking up is it's not an event, it's a process. It's not going to be something that's just going to happen. I think partly because we first have to define the idea of what are we waking up to. Am I waking up to my partner? Am I waking up to the impact of my words on somebody in a conversation I had? Am I waking up to what happens when I don't recycle my trash? There are so many things, and again, as you say, there's this beautiful synergy and overlap in the cleaning up, growing up, showing up, that there are so many things we could potentially wake up to. So there is no one thing. And I think the there's the idea that when we wake up, it's all going to be okay. That suddenly we're going to be there, and yeah, man, I got there. I woke
I
up.
guess what people think of with enlightenment. All right, once I'm enlightened,
Yeah,
like that's it. I'm done. I'm completed life. Like,
no. I mean, one of the things that you hear Ken kind of talking about quite regularly in integral theory is the fact that the world is exactly as we left it. So when we come back from an awakened experience, whether or not we want to see that as samadhi, kensho, satori, any of the other kind of terms that we see in the contemplative practices for waking up, the world is left exactly as we found it. So this comes right back into the old adage that before enlightenment I chopped wood and carried water, and after enlightenment I chopped wood and carried water. Nothing changed. The only thing that changed was my perception of reality around me. But in a sense, I still have to come back in, and I still have to do all the stuff that I used to do. So it's also in some respects, it can be quite a disorientating thing, because when you have a transcendent experience of an epic quality, you think that's it. Everything, when you're in it, everything is complete, everything is whole. There is nothing that you need. It's beautiful, but it's interesting that it's a challenging state to sustain in our world, because I still have to go out to work, and I still have to earn money, and I still have to clean my house, and do that stuff. And I know just before we were recording, we were talking about this idea of maybe going off into the wilderness and just living as the kind of the primal naked human. But even primal naked humans got to forage for food, got to find shelter, got to stay warm. What happens when the seasons change and it's winter, or there's no food available, or I can't find water? So to a degree, waking up is beautiful, but it's a holon. It's only part of a greater thing that we're in. And I think it's easy to get too focused on this idea of waking up and not be aware of how it will actually integrate into the rest of your life. And essentially, don't get too focused on the one thing. It's part of the process, and it's part of the thing that we're moving towards, but don't become obsessed with it. Don't become into this idea that once you achieve that, all things will be well and all things will be fine, which we feel in that state. When we're in that awakened state, it feels like nothing is important. But then there's a knock at the door, or the phone rings, or
you're gonna come back.
Amazon's arrived, or whatever. It's you're back in the room, and I think it's the integration that's then the challenging part.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's well said. And it almost sounds like to me, there's kind of like micro and macro waking ups. And I mean, even just to maybe kind of encapsulate it within a word, awareness, so it's this increase in awareness, which could be on a micro level, like kind of waking up to what's happening to your recycling, or waking up to your relationship with your partner. But then there's that macro waking up, which is almost like dying, and Ken has a beautiful quote that he shares by, I believe it's like a Zen master, but it's, if you die before you die, when you die, you won't. So it's like it almost seems like it's necessary for a human being to go through this macro waking up to kind of realize who they are and who they are not. But then it comes back to that integration aspect, because once you have that realization, once you tap into source, once you have that all-knowing connection and experience, what's next? That's only a momentary state of awareness, but we have to come back down. And it's good because we've now unlocked all those perspectives that we can take at any time. We've unlocked those neural pathways. We can tap into that. But when we come back down, it's like, how do we integrate what we've woken up to into our present reality that we're currently experiencing? And so I guess with that, if you don't have any comments, what does that integration process look like? And I know it's going to be incredibly unique and individual, but I guess like an overview of how one would begin to like actually think of integrating, having woken up to who they truly are.
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing to kind of reflect on with that is something that Gampo Roshi, who taught Big Mind Processed within the integral community, one of the things that he was talking about in some of the early Big Mind lectures is that if you don't continue to practice, then the awakening experience you have just becomes a nice memory. It just becomes something you did, and you can remember waking up and you can remember having that. But one of the things that we see, again, the Wilbekoom's lattice is a useful reminder of this, is that those states of consciousness, they're all temporary. But what we're trying to do is have acquired state stages so that our access into the subtle realms from a waking point of view, to the causal realms from a waking point of view, to the non-dual realms from a waking point of view, is something that becomes an acquired state stage only through practice. So I think one of the most important things that we have to do once we have an awakening, in whatever way we want to term that, is we have to continue with the practices. And I can remember Osho speaking about it as well, and one of his followers saying to him that they'd had this awakened experience just ever so briefly, and everything dissolved and they were in that pure bliss state, but it only lasted a very, very short period of time. What did that mean? And he just went, I'm good, keep practicing. You felt it, now continue on the journey.
Yeah.
So, and again, I think the term waking up makes it seem like it's just a thing, but it's a continuous process. And I promise you, again, we were laughing about the kind of the time scale. 24 years time. Let's you and I have another conversation. And let's ask how awake you feel then.
Let's see how much I've practiced.
Exactly. And why didn't you? If you didn't, what was it that kind of got in the way? And what was it that made you think, well, I can sit on my mat and dissolve into absolute bliss, or I can do something else?
Yeah.
And the amount of times that we choose the other thing is also, I think, really interesting.
Yeah, I think, at least why we choose to, I guess, even constantly seek that state. I mean, for me, I guess it kind of delves a little bit into the shadow. And if there's like why are you seeking, or are you escaping, because then, maybe even meditation, things like that, a lot of people use them to escape rather than find the magnificence within themselves, So I guess waking up could even be a distraction to some degree if you don't, know how to really work with it correctly. Which is, I guess,
sure. What do you choose?
It would seem very prevalent, meditation's so popular, but yet so many people are still psychologically distraught and imbalanced. And it's like the whole, we've never had more doctors, health coaches, hospitals and everything, yet 5 to 6 billion people have metabolic dysfunction and all kinds of different, health issues. So are we actually doing the work and doing that true practice, like taking the time to actually do the work?
But you see, I think that this really then starts to overlap into cleaning up and showing up. And, we have a profoundly sick society. The very structure of our society is sick, and it's terminal, and it's temporary. It's going to go through another transition. And I think all of these tools are so vital in helping us. But we have to recognize that actually the world we live in is a very messy and very disturbed space. And so in the process of waking up, part of what we're also doing is waking up to just how off the rails that's become, especially in the last kind of 40 years, I would say. And so our attraction for these things, our need for these things has become deeper. So part of this craving is also, if we look at the voice of desire as a, kind of a voice within us, desire is always going to want something. And it doesn't matter what the thing is, desire is always going to want a thing. And, while we're serving ourselves with the thing that we wanted, we're already looking for the next thing we desire. Yeah. But we can take that into levels of discernment. So the voice of desire can transmit into the voice of the seeker. Now, the voice of the seeker is always going to seek. The seeker of the way is another part of us, is always going to seek the way. And do you know what it's going to do when it finds the way? It's going to keep seeking another way, because that's what those parts of us do. And yes, some of those bits are in shadow. Yes, they're dissociated. And, and in this whole process of waking up, we're also going through trying to dissolve the primary dualisms that we exist within. So, ego is divided into persona and shadow. We have the human organism as itself is divided into ego as mind and body. We also then have that separation of self from environment. And that brings in with itself the other idea that there's an end to life, that things stop and start, rather than really being at one with the universal constant, the thing that's just in constant flux anyway. We can't even see the amount of atoms, protons, neutrons, all the rest of it that bash into us all the time, and other bits that break off and disappear. We're so unsolid, but realizing ourselves at that level is not a comfortable experience, because we have to drop all of these structures that we're hanging on to, and that is a very painful thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Waking up can be painful because you can leave some bits of yourself behind, which is when we'll get into cleanup, because we don't want to leave anything behind per se. We want to integrate them. I love what you said. And I just wanted to maybe bring into perspective of waking up kind of being an opportunity for us to get outside of the box, to actually really think differently. Because the reason why we're in the state we're in on the planet is collectively due to all our decision making and all the choices that we've made to some extent. Whereas if we could kind of wake up, leave this kind of one perspective that we've been stuck in, we'd be able to see the world from a different perspective, therefore think differently, make different decisions, make different choices, and go about our actions completely differently. There's just so much value within that waking up, I think, for us to especially the catalyzed change. How do we, that whole Einstein quote, you can't solve the same problem from the level of consciousness that made it. So we have to wake up out of this kind of level that we've been in to transform ourselves and the world into a completely different place.
Yeah. And I think as well, we get, we're Hollywoodized, we're sensationalized. We want some boom, someone big kind of everything.
I want Jesus to come from the sky and save me.
Absolutely, yeah, sure. Watch the aliens build the pyramids while flying around on a unicorn. Let's make it as fun as we can. But the waking up is also just, it's exactly what you say. It's about those shifts in perspective. Those are the waking up. Has somebody ever shown you a shortcut on a keyboard or for a tool, and you go, oh, great. Mind blown. That solves that problem for me. Hey, did you know if you try this like this, you'll get this response? No, touch that there, feel how that affects your body. Whoa. There's all these different bits that we can get to know ourselves. And again, back into quadrants, we can get to know our minds in a different way. We can get to know our bodies and our behaviors, our relationships, our culture, our environment. We've got so many places where we can wake up as well. And, let's say you studied the cello for 50 years, you can continue to wake up into that. It's not a thing, and it doesn't have to be limited. There are so many places that we can just wake up and open up to something greater.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess there's probably, again, there's levels to waking up, right? It's like a never ending thing. Same with health. You can always find a greater level of health, a greater level of organization, a higher level of consciousness. It is infinite. Really, especially even when it comes to learning. And if we live in an infinite universe and there's no stop at waking up, there's no stop at the level of consciousness you can achieve. So, yeah, don't think you're just done after one, like we said in the beginning. It's a process, it's a spiral that we're constantly moving up, that's expanding as we move up it. But yeah, I think that's kind of a great little exploration for waking up, and hopefully we've given people a good understanding. Obviously, people, we could talk about just waking up for hours, especially if we apply waking up to, all four quadrants, I, we, its, and its. We could apply it to all of them and unpack that as well, which is why integral is so beautiful, because this is so interconnected, so interconnected. So we did mention cleaning up and showing up. Personally, I know, at least from my research, that Dustin DePerna does kind of have an order to these, and
Yeah.
I do feel you could probably tweak it a little bit, but his order, at least that I've seen, is waking up, growing up, cleaning up, showing up. I feel, and it probably doesn't make too much of a difference, but I feel like cleaning up cleaning up should probably come after waking up, because I find during that waking up process, including myself, and I know many other people do, forget or are unconscious of the fact that they're leaving parts of themselves behind. And so as we wake up, we need to simultaneously also be cleaning up and including these aspects that we are maybe are unconsciously repressing or trying to throw away. But yeah, do you just want to give an overview of cleaning up and then share your perspective again?
Yeah, I mean, and just before I jump into that, the way that I look at those four aspects, waking up, cleaning up, growing up, showing up, for me, they tetraarise. So we're doing parts of all of them at once. And I don't feel it's necessarily useful to think, well, I'll do that one first, then that one, then that one, then that one. I think they're like little sliders that we just adjust a little bit all the way, so we keep on going into them. But the cleaning up side of ourselves, and I'm going to kind of break into two parts of this, because again, from a quadrants point of view, there's the subjective cleaning up and there's the objective cleaning up. And I think both of them are, it's integral. We don't ever let one go ahead of the other. So, in terms of our shadow self, it's important for people, I think, who, like, I come across people quite often that say that they've done shadow work. I've done my shadow work. And my answer is no, you haven't. You've done some shadow work.
Yeah.
But just in the conversation that you and I are having, we could create new shadow elements, in each other, with each other, and so on. So shadow is an unfolding thing. And this is why you can never be done in any one of these aspects. We can wake up at various times in various ways, but we can clean up more as we go along. Because certainly with shadow being so unconscious for us, there's this joke about, we know what we know, and we know there's stuff we don't know, but we don't know how much we don't know. The shadow is significant. It's unconscious, so you don't have an idea of what's going on in there. And it might take very, very specific circumstances, situations, for some of those moments to actually, kind of come up in irritation in a way that allows us to catch them. And, we can do our journaling, and we can do all of the exercises for self-inquiry that we do. But we're so good at putting stuff into shadow that we could skirt around and circle around these things endlessly, chipping away at them. And, I really acknowledge this in myself, that there are things that I can even say out loud. Yeah, I know that issue is going on with me, but I can't get to the real shadow that's sitting behind that, because for whatever reason, it's not the right moment. And I guess I was always reassured. I spent a lot of hours listening to Genpo Roshi and practicing his methods. And one of the things that I was reassured by, he had his first Satori in the mid-70s. He was recognized as a Zen master in the early 80s. And just, some of the stuff I've been with him in 2020, he's still acknowledging new pieces of his, disowned unconscious that he's bringing back in. And this is a Zen master with over, kind of 40 years experience. So don't ever think you're done with this stuff. It's a continual practice. And again, our waking up, part of that is having that sensitivity and that presence to recognize when those things are in action. Because with shadow, the two really easy rules to understand with shadow are you see yourself to lack that quality, whatever it is, and you see it out in the environment around you. And typically it's much larger than you. So I'm diminished, it seems greater out there. And even looking at the language, I and it, we're changing proportions. So I lack it, it's outside of me, and it affects me. It doesn't just inform me. So if I see somebody behaving in a particular way, if I can acknowledge I could do that, I could be that guy, and I don't feel affected by him, it's probably not shadow. I might not be able to acknowledge that I can do it, but I'm just informed that guy's behaving that way. Might not be shadow. I can feel that I can own that quality and still be affected by seeing somebody do it. That might not be shadow. But if I'm affected by it and I believe myself to lack that capacity, then it's so it's a very simple way of then watching what's happening inside of us. And for that, you see, we also have to have a level of awareness about the body. How many of us are really noticing when something happens? I mean, years of sitting with clients and asking them questions about where they're at and what's going on and what they're struggling with. And you can see some questions just cause these momentary little twitches in their system. So what was that about? What happened in there? Where did you go when that happened? And catching those little tiny bits, because we're so good at pushing this stuff away that we'll have the reaction and then we're back in the room. Don't want to go into that, and we'll dissociate. You'll see people disappear out of themselves and start to think about it in a very dissociated way. So staying in the body, that's part of the cleaning up process, is not looking to get away from the sensations, not looking to get away from the things that we all got programmed with. I mean, there's a bit of a joke that you spend the first half of your life filling yourself up with all of these programs and patterns and understandings about the world, and you spend the second half of your life trying to clean it all up again and sort it all out. And it's why also I've got respect for you and the generation of people with you that are listening to you, because you're starting at a beautiful age for this. And the more that we can bring this in, and I mean, again, I was lucky because of my family situation, we started pretty early on some of this stuff. But it's important that we start these processes early on. So that's the shadow side of it. But I also think as well, with cleaning up, the other bit we've got to remember is the external. So both individual and collective. If I'm buying factory farm, pesticide-ridden, hormone-driven products that are, pesticides that are wrecking the insect colonies, then I can't create a good space in the mind either, because again, the body is going to affect the mind, the environment is going to affect the relationships and everything in between that. So it's important for me that what I do with my money, where I put my energy, all of those things, we want to be as clean as possible. And I mean, as an interesting example of how some of this is in dissonance. I've had conversations over the years with vegan friends who are very strongly vegan, very kind of zealous in some of their views, and yet you say to them, "So how much do you make sure that you're only having organic?" And they go, "Well, I can't afford it." Okay, so tell me about your principles again. I see you on Facebook promoting McDonald's vegan burger. Tell me how that company that's involved in more slaughter of more animals from more mass farming and controlling so many farms that they can drive prices down and have killed off independent farming in large parts of America. Tell me why you supporting their vegan burger is an ethical choice, is a healthy choice that's helping our planet. Whereas me, who's buying, grass-fed, organic, locally reared, cared for meat from down the road, why I'm the criminal. So I think as well, there's a lot of dissonance about what it means to be clean and to understand how we're doing it. I mean, I'm sat here on a laptop that I know for a fact was probably made in a sweatshop in Asia.
Yeah.
So and there's a part of me that has to be okay with that and come to terms with that as well. So cleaning up is quite a nuanced thing as well. And it's very easy to virtue signal and wander around and think that, because you're in your organic clothing and you're having a shake and you can, I mean, Instagram is an interesting place to kind of.
It's a good way to create shadow material.
It's a beautiful place, and it's a beautiful place to see how much of it triggers you as well.
Yeah.
Because very, very quickly as you're going through the stuff, what's the stuff that's like, I don't want to do that.
You don't even have to read a caption to get triggered. You just see someone post a selfie in a certain way, or whatever, and it can set off a whole cascade of responses within inside of yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think everything you said is amazing, and I love that you kind of touched on it across the quadrants from an individual level to that external physical level with our environment and everything, which is a big thing that we need to be aware of. And I think maybe to tie this a little bit into waking up and kind of the awareness is just how much consciousness and energy we have wrapped up in our unconscious, in our shadow. Like a lot of us don't have this awareness or this clarity of consciousness to have, and even have the energy to be able to think critically, because we lack consciousness, because we have so much of it wrapped up in our unconscious. And I love the example that Ken gives, especially when he talks about moving to new levels and continuing to transcend, is you need a certain amount of consciousness to get to the next level. He uses the whole pesos of consciousness. Let's say, you need 60 pesos to get to the next level, but you've only got 20. Well, there's 40 pesos of consciousness wrapped up in your unconscious. If only we could go in, clean up, and liberate that consciousness, would we be able to expand our awareness and liberate more energy and be able to continue move onwards and upwards? It's just, I think it's so critical to shadow work is, I think it's essential, and it's something that we get. It should be in the school curriculum. I mean, it really should be like literally essential. Absolutely. Because on the other side of it, at least for me, shadow work and, really taking care of our psychological health is about creating more open, loving, and deeper connections with people and the environment itself. So absolutely essential.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's stuff that we don't really realize the value of that. This whole process of waking up, because it's a journey as well. I mean, I can't begin to express for anybody that it is new to their kind of internal journey and their self-development, how much you will change over 20 years. You think you've done a lot in 1 year or 5 years. You wait until you've been in it 20, 25, 30 years, and just the shifts that continue to come through that. And it's not a race. There's nowhere to get to. So, again, you're not going to get to a point where it's like, here's your flag, here's your certificate, here's your medal, you got there, well done. It's going to keep unfolding. And this is always what I like about, kind of integral life practice as well. And coming back to what I was saying earlier about, if you don't continue to do your practices, it just becomes a nice experience. It just becomes a nice memory. You have to keep on going back over these bits a little bit at a time. And it may be that today or this week or this month or this year, shadow will be more dominant. Maybe next week, next month, next year, you'll do a little bit more development with your physical body to look after it because you're aware of the fact that it's getting a little older and it's aching a little bit. Or you'll go to your diet, or you'll study, or you'll be in your relationship, or you'll be developing your job in a different way. These are all practices. And I'm totally in agreement that shadow should be in all schoolwork. And I think, as rote, it should be taught to every teacher, every
Yes.
manager, every politician, every parent. If all of those people got taught shadow work across the board, then it would be so much easier for everybody coming up through our generations. It's still going to take a while, but yeah, I think it should be in there, because it's also easy, if we're not careful with shadow work, to enter into a lot of gaslighting and a lot of spiritual bypassing as well. So they're kind of fun to watch in
Yeah.
action.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's I want to ask you just maybe a couple practices, or how does one actually begin to engage and work and get in contact with their shadow. But I want to ask you a question that I asked you on a previous recording that didn't make it up, but I just remembered that this was a question that I did ask you, and I wanted to just have you share your perspective again for the audience. Now, it was something along the lines of, a common theme that I've heard with the people that I speak to and the podcasts that I've done is that, the quote unquote elite, the powers that be, and then, I guess the actors on the stage being the government and like these, government officials and the Faucis and everyone. The answer that I get when it comes to doing our shadow work around them is that they are actually a manifestation of the collective shadow. So they're arising and expressing all the traits, qualities, wants, needs, desires that we've collectively denied, collectively repressed, collectively thrown into that bag, as the shadow. And it's kind of manifested as these individuals to so-called help us reconnect and become whole and do our shadow work. I'm just wondering, one, your perspective on that, and then two, how can we, I guess, begin to do shadow work with these figures, because there is so much psychological projection and all sorts of shadow boxing going on with these individuals. And I think there's a lot of healing to be done there if we are to change our relationship with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think we are, regardless of whether we know it or not, whether we believe it or not, we are watching collective shadow and collective unconsciousness, unfolding in the way that it does. And I think one of the things that I think is important, in the way that when I'm teaching shadow, the way that I try and express it, is when you have your characters that you don't like. For a start of, that's the map. That it's not the territory, because unless that's somebody that you actually physically spend time with, you're already projecting. Because
Yeah.
and we know the beauty of media being able to shape things to look at, and you can find a support for almost any narrative within our global internet, our global consciousness as it is right now. And I think the important thing to remember is those characteristics that you don't like in those individuals are capacities that you have, whether you like that or not. And the trick within shadow work is to acknowledge, I have that capacity, and I know that I am that. And I know that in certain circumstances, I might also express that. And I think I remember, like, the first time I taught this in a shadow workshop, and I was saying to the students that even the concept of being a murderer or a rapist, you've got to own that you have that capacity.
100%. That's a challenging one for people, because I bring that up to people as well. Like, can you heal? Can you acknowledge the pedophile inside of you? Can you acknowledge the rapist inside of you? Because if you look inside of yourself, you will find everyone. You'll find Hitler, you'll find Donald Trump, you will find everyone inside of you. So that's a good one. I humble people and to make them realize that you're a human being. You have every single trait in perfect order, no matter what you think.
And I think those are some of the really challenging things within shadow work. And that's where we end up with a lot of spiritual bypassing, is that we want to dissociate from those ideas. But if you believe in the idea that life is unitary, everything is one anyway, then so are they. And if the universe is unfolding exactly as it means to, then they're also doing the job of the universe. And who are you to tell them that that isn't right? What the universe is doing is it's unfolding and exploring itself. What arrogance! Maybe we're the bit that the universe has sent them other geezers to get rid of. And it's one of the things. I was listening to a bit of Jordan Peterson today, and he was being asked about whether or not he thought that climate change would be the kind of the theme, the topic that would unite all of us. And he was just flat no, because people are not going to give up using their iPhones. People are not going to give up traveling. People are not going to give up doing a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to have to wait until everything actually breaks apart before we can rise out of it. And there's an author, Irvin Laszlo, who wrote a really interesting book called Science in the Akashic Fields. And he talks about how universes, when they get to a particular point, they'll collapse, they'll fall apart, and they'll just dissolve back into this ground plane. But it's not back to the zero that it was before. The collapse creates a new structure, and the new universe then starts to evolve from that point. So that it's not a circle that we're doing, it's a spiral. Everything is growing off on itself, and it'll expand, contract, expand, collapse, grow, decay, and that's just going to continue to happen. So, we're in a funny space where these characters who we've supported, people did vote for Trump, people did support Hitler, people love Fauci, so there's all sorts of really interesting goo going on in our minds with all of this, and to be able to play with it and find a space where we're still in center, where we can acknowledge those qualities in ourselves. I am that. I can understand exactly why Fauci's doing the things he's doing, and I'm comfortable with the fact that I have that capacity. Ain't no way I'm going to personally do that right now as I stand here in this moment, but that doesn't mean that tomorrow, faced with a certain situation, we saw the research back in the 70s and 80s where the CIA did some really fun stuff for people's heads, and they would get passers-by in a street, come into a building, take them into what looked like a lab, guy in a white coat, clipboard, dashboard in front of you, somebody on the other side of a screen hooked up to electrodes, but they weren't really, it was all acting, and the scientist type character telling people to turn this dial, and every time they did, the guy on the other side of the screen would pretend he was having a shock because he was getting a light above him to let him know when to do it, but it was all acting. And they convinced people to turn these dials all the way up into a red zone that said danger, and the guy would totally fizz out and then pretend to die. But because they'd been told to do it, they did it without question. And they've done bizarre experiments where they would put, kind of 30 people in a room, all there for a job interview, but 29 of them are actors. And then they would fake a fire coming in from another room, and all the actors were told to not move, just ignore it. And the amount of people that didn't say anything because nobody else did, it's incredible how much that need to be part of the herd, to be accepted, to not put ourselves in a situation where we're going to be policed by the crowd for not being good enough, either because we're not keeping up or because we're going ahead into other spaces.
That's fascinating. I mean, I feel like it speaks a lot to what played out over the last couple of years. I mean, that's a great example in which, from one perspective, let's say there is no virus, just like there is no electricity going through that thing. They've just made people believe that, that they're being influenced by something. And then it's almost like they've done exactly both. The kind of like electrical impulsing, and then the fire one, which is like the whole vaccination thing, right? It's the fire, get the vaccine and do this. And then the other people are like, all right, we just do that. That's it. And so once you have that herd moving in one direction, that momentum, it just sucks people in. We're such tribal beings that we feel that need to like be in the community and do what everyone else is doing and not think for ourselves, which kind of does move into growing up to some extent.
But we just don't realize as well how much we're being Wizard of Oz. There's something going on behind the curtain. Modern technology would trick so much. How many AI bot accounts are pushing a narrative for us? How many crisis actors are being used in situations to reinforce an idea? How many people are being paid to put an idea forward? How many platforms are then supporting the idea? To make it really difficult. Again, we come down to this term that's becoming very popular at the moment, this mass formation psychosis. That because we're being constantly hypnotized by the same ideas, it makes waking up, cleaning up so much more difficult for us.
That mass formation psychosis, did you say? Is a interesting thing, absolutely, to just observe that's playing out. There's two questions I want to ask you, just based on kind of the practical side of working or doing the cleaning up and working with our psychological health. The first one just slipped my mind. I wanted to. So it was kind of, you did mention a couple things, but recognizing what seems to be shadow, would one of them be anything that seems like it's out of the blue, that doesn't seem like it's you, that does, like, it just seems very almost random, like, wow, that didn't seem like me, but it happened? Is that shadow material? And then
it can be,
can be. And then secondly, just what are some of the other, I guess, primary ways that you like to encourage people to begin digging into that side of themselves?
I mean, a lot of the time it's the places where we have the resistances.
Okay.
And I think that's a really good place. I think recognizing that where we lack it, it's another way of saying it doesn't seem like me. It's not something that I identify with, but also looking at where we resist. So what, and another really useful kind of concept within shadow is, what are the things that we're addicted to? What are the things that we can't do without? And also, what are the things that we have allergies to? What are the things that we're repulsed by and can't stand to be around? Those are often really good sources of shadow information as well.
Couple breadcrumbs to pick up and follow down and then get into it. I like that. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about growing up. Where do you like to start with when it comes to growing up?
It's inevitable, but it doesn't mean that you will necessarily continue. So again, easiest thing to come back to is the spiral dynamics and the levels of cultural development that we see, going through from our archaic, magic, mythic, rational, pluralistic, integral, so on. So we have increasing levels of awareness, and that each stage of development, each stage of growing up will be more complex than the previous one, and that we're at some level hopefully going to transcend the useful stuff from the previous stage and include that into the new stage. Because I think one of the, and again, we can split our consciousness into tier 1, tier 2. All the tier 1 levels of development don't necessarily realize that there are levels of development, and that they're necessary, and that they have to unfold in order. And this is why we get a lot of polarity and a lot of dissociation from each other, because if your rational viewpoint clashes with my mythic viewpoint, I'm going to think that I've got the best idea, you're going to think that you've got the best idea, and we're just going to push each other away. But in second tier consciousness, this really is one of the best places where we've recognized that all those rungs in the ladder are necessary to get to the level where we're at, and we can't miss any of them, and they all have valuable parts, and we kind of forget how much we're still running on our archaic and our magic and our mythic belief processes and all of the various aspects that come through that. Even the idea that we should have a level of order in society, and that we should respect each other, and that we should follow rules, that's mythic. So if you're still hanging on to some of that, does that mean that you're trapped in mythic? Not at all. It just means that you transcended and included something that was valuable and useful, and included it into where you went into next. So, it's important that we're not pushing these past parts away. We're still using them. They still have a value. Archaic, basic survival instincts. If we didn't have those, we wouldn't know when to eat. We wouldn't know when to sleep. We wouldn't have the desire to procreate. So these aspects are important. But linking this back into some of the shadow stuff as well, each one of these changes between a stage is also a really rich point for potential shadow elements to arise. Because to move from one stage to another, first we have to recognize that we're limited by the stage we're in. So we start to dissociate in it, and we start to want to have a differentiation. We can see that it's no longer adequate for what we want. And often we see friendship groups changing, tastes in music, in literature, and all sorts of stuff start to shift. And that's also an interesting way to spot when there's some shadow in action as well, is you're still hanging on to stuff you really loved years and years ago, and you can't let it go. You don't let go of it. So we start to kind of see this differentiation between where I think I need to be and where I am. Then we make a transition into the new stage, and then we have to integrate the new stage. And at any one of those points, we can create shadow element, either becoming addicted to something in the past, or creating an allergy to something, a repulsion for something that we're moving into. Because, of course, every stage of development that you move into as you grow up has its own shadow. So, you solve one lot of problems, maybe, if you're lucky, but then you move into another set of problems. And because each stage is more complex, there's even more problems in the new stage than there was in the previous one, which is why a lot of us, kind of want to stay in, as men often especially, we want to stay in our childlike stages. Who wouldn't want everything done for them and food put on the table and just get to play?
Literally. I know so many men in that who are living that life where their girlfriend cooks all the food, and, it's kind of, very similar to that mother figure where it folds the washing and, does everything for you, makes the bed and, wipes your ass if you're that dependent. But, it is interesting. So, I mean, I get a sense that, growing up, I mean, at least from one perspective, really seems like becoming a true individual, like really individuating into like this true individuation of developing into your true unique selves, which makes sense that we'd probably need to move on up through these structures of consciousness to really individualize. Would that be tied in there?
I mean, from my perspective, yes and no, because like waking up, growing up is something that just continues. Okay, and we're never there. We're never done. We're never going to get to a point where we have grown up, where we are our authentic, original self.
The individual, like the individuated person. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Because what I believe about that today, in 10 years' time, when I've got 10 years more practice under my belt, it'll be different again, except for the unintegrated shadow bits, which I'll still hang on to, and I think that this is it. It's wokeness that has this idea that you're just this thing, you get there and that's it. There's nothing else to do. But, part of our growing up really is about moving through these things in steps and stages. And we continue to do that. And Ken talks about it in relation to shadow. We always have this superiority issue that goes on that, okay, I'm an integral, great, and you're only a pluralistic or rational. But so what? If you're at integral, why aren't you at super integral? Why aren't you at the next level yet? People are where they are. And depending on the cultures that they're in is going to depend on whether or not there's the stimulus and the impetus and the encouragement to continue learning. Which, if you're somebody that works in a farming community, you might not really need to develop that much. You might not need to understand deep informational kind of levels of consciousness to be able to work the land. So we can't require people to grow up. And ideally, we shouldn't disrespect or shame anybody for not doing that.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter. Ultimately, you're going to dissolve back into the cosmic soup anyway. You just have this opportunity to explore and expand and develop and grow if you want to. But if you're happy at the level that you're at, that's okay. And if I'm really waking up, cleaning up, and growing up, I should allow all of that. I should feel compassion towards the fact that that's your choice and I love you for it anyway.
Yeah, and at least from what I've heard Ken Wilber share of growing up, a part of growing up is to learn to take other people's perspectives. So rather than requiring them to grow up, you can take their perspective instead. And he gives a beautiful example of like you have an adult holding a cube, and each side of the cube has different colors, and he's standing next to a child. The child looking up at the cube sees a blue side, and because of his level of consciousness, assumes that the adult is also seeing the blue side. But to grow up would to realize that I'm seeing a blue side, he's seeing a yellow side, but I'm actually able to take that perspective. So then rather than projecting the requirement of this person to grow up, I can, since I've grown up, take their perspective and meet them where they're at, So I think that's also an important part of this.
Absolutely. And remember that somewhere there's a guy watching the guy and the child with the cube seeing something else. And somewhere else there's somebody watching the guy and the child with somebody else. The perspectives in a sense are infinite, and the potential for the perspectives is infinite. And none of them are wrong. They're all just perspectives.
Yeah, and I think we could, that would do a great deal in society if only we could learn how to take other people's perspectives and kind of step into their shoes and look through their eyes. It would humble us, it would neutralize us, it would allow us to have a sense of compassion and just have a more deeper and open, connected relationship with people. And it's just practice taking perspectives, practice learning to look through other people's eyes and not be so rigid and stuck in your one concrete perspective, which so many of us are in, which leads to a lot of the suffering and conflict and everything that we experience. But I like what we've touched on there. Let's wrap up with showing up and just dancing, playing. I mean, there's so many things that again we could talk about. Yeah, but I'd love for you to again kick things off with your perspective on showing up.
I mean, for me, part of showing up, again, I like some of how Jordan Peterson talks about just taking responsibility. Showing up is having responsibility, because if you stay in that adualistic, childlike state, then eventually you're going to die, and it'll be a lot quicker. By taking some responsibility, by working towards things, by choosing things that you're passionate about and have interest in, and moving towards them and looking towards creating something within your world that you feel has meaning and purpose, that is that act, again, of waking up and growing up, but in that sense of responsibility and in the greater collective as well. Showing up is not thinking that you're entitled, that just because you're alive, that, you and I, white males, none of that really makes any true difference. We have this opportunity to do something and show up and add into the world. And that for me is so important, that I want to do as much good as I can for as many people as I can, in as many places as I can, and as much time as I can. that is a showing up for me. And the work that I've chosen to do, and I mean, I knew even as a teenager that what I valued was feeling the shift in energy in a person when they grasped something that they hadn't before. That they, whether they understood a piece of information, understood themselves, had an experience that woke them up again to another part of themselves. And I could, even as a teenager, I was aware of that within people. And there was something valuable about that. And so I knew that I wanted to follow that. And so, I did my studies, went to university. I realized that wasn't how I wanted to be with stuff. But I kept on exploring because that seed was there. And in Chinese philosophy, there's one of the 8 extraordinary vessels in the body, Chong Mai. It's often, in Vedanta, it's Sushumna, it's the channel through the center of the body. But Chong Mai is where the spark of the divine resides within you. And that's the gift of the universe looking to unfold through you in your lifetime, in that experience. But the universe isn't precious about it. It knows time in a totally different way. So if you don't realize that potential, when you die, it'll just take it back and it'll put it somewhere else and see what happens then. So we have an opportunity, and that's what the showing up is take advantage of that opportunity. If you're a young person and you don't know what to do with your life, look around you and see what you can add value to, and then what would give you value, and just do something. And even if you get into it and realize that's not what you want to do, that's great, because you've shown up enough to realize that that's not what you want to do. So then just redirect. And, I mean, I've worked with so many teenagers over the years that feel under absolute pressure to decide what they're going to do at university, what career they're going to have, how they're going to be in life. And sure, and now who I am, understanding what I do, my answer is fuck that shit. Don't worry about that. It's just like, where do you feel you want to put your energy right now? What's that contribution you want to make in the world? Because don't just sit there and do nothing. Don't just sit there and play on your Xbox and moan at your mother. Do something that adds value. That's the showing up for me.
I love that. I love that. It was I was listening to Dustin DePona recently. I was having a conversation with someone, and he's just such an eloquent speaker. But he was really talking about how, we're really trying to open ourselves up to allow consciousness to express, its maximum potential through us. And it's like showing up that we give the universe and consciousness an opportunity to really begin to flow through us. And it's the waking up, cleaning up, and growing up that kind of plays a role in kind of the openness of our vessel and container, and the ability for consciousness to express through us. But I think there's just so much value in, like you said, just show up. Like I like to think that Earth is sometimes it's like a big party. Like, and most people are just sitting down. I was like, get up and dance, show up and dance. And it doesn't matter if you don't know how to dance, if you don't know how to groove, if you're shy, you will learn. You will find the groove, and the groove will find you. All you need to do is simply show up.
Yeah. And again, from the Qigong background that I have, we see that as Jian Wu, the spirit dance. Everything is in motion and movement, and we can take part in it and we can play in it. Again, it's Leela, the idea of being in play. Our world is so serious as well, and it is important that we are exploring it from a joyous perspective as well. I find it kind of interesting that we've developed this society where the 40-hour grind is how we define ourselves from when we leave school. And let's face it, most of school is a preparation for the grind. That's why you get homework. That's why things are graded A to F. That's factory thinking, preparing us for this grind. And I love that idea that, you're here to do more than pay taxes and die. So... I'm one person that actually is very interested in the arrival of automation and a lot of the AI and the Android controlled mechanoid type society. Looking at some of Buckminster Fuller's ideas from the late 70s, early 80s, and just this idea that we ought not to be working here. What are we spending so much time and energy producing? You've only got to look at the amount of waste that we create with party tricks and pieces of plastic and clothes that we don't need, and so much stuff that imagine how different the world would be if we didn't ask people to waste their time and energy creating that stuff just so they were allowed to have access to food, have access to homes, and so on. And it's a very, very weird, I think we've, in the last few thousand years, we've developed a really weird way of living that doesn't really seem to me to be about communities just creating what they actually need to have a rich life. In our hunter-gatherer days, especially here in the Northern Hemisphere in the UK, we would have spent most of the winter, kind of pretty much huddled away, fires, alcohol, food that we saved, storytelling, creating art. They would have been very, very different. And then when we get through to the spring and the summer, we'll come out, we'll do different things, we'll prepare everything that community needs for the year ahead. So we've really twisted our way of living in a manner that it is unsustainable, and it is going to change, and it's going to change soon. Certainly before the end of my lifetime, definitely in your lifetime. We're going to see some radical changes, and there's a part of me that's really excited about some of that and how it can really support humans to be free. And there's the other side of that, which is concerned it's going to be used as a tool for imprisonment.
Yeah, my concern is on that is, will people have the capacity to even leave that old system because they've been so indoctrinated into it that they don't know how to have fun and play. They literally only know how to wake up, grind 9 to 5, have my coffee, have my dinner, watch my TV. That's all they know. They don't know how to think critically. Like, if you ask someone to do whatever you want, create your own business, they wouldn't actually know how to, because we've been taught what to think, and the whole school system that's literally, again, doesn't want us to create our own businesses and play and just dance on the dance when they want us, serving the drinks to them who would get to dance on the dance floor. So yeah, the system is absolutely very twisted and, if anything, very alien. Just one more thing I wanted to mention with showing up is, I feel like showing up also gives us the opportunity to see where we're at within waking up, cleaning up, and growing up. So it's like every time we show up, we get to like reflect and like, well, where am I with my waking up? Where am I with my cleaning up? Where am I with my growing up? And do I need to refine that? Can I continue to work on that? But it's only when we show up do we almost get a glimpse into where we're at within those kind of stages.
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff is really important to have a reflection back on where we're at. And one of my favorite experiences is to go to places I've been to in the past. So where I live now up in North Wales, for a long time I grew up in the southwest of England in a place called Cornwall. And whenever I used to go back to visit my mum, sometimes there were like years between some of those visits. And I used to love going to places that I'd wandered around as a teenager and standing there and just looking at what was the same there and what had changed, and how I had changed in reflection to it and what had stayed the same. And so it's really interesting to have these cosmic addresses, these places where we can go to and actually, and again, in integral, don't forget your environment. Use an environment to come back into a place, which in a sense is part of the idea behind when you're doing meditation. Have a place that you do it. Create yourself a little altar or a little something that helps you come back to that, because then over and over again you're coming back into something that I've had a crummy day, I go and sit in my meditation space and I can feel the difference. I've had a great day, I go and sit in my meditation space and I feel that. So we've got these mirrors, these points that we can use for reflection as well.
Yeah, I think reflection is so valuable. I mean, how do we grow if we're not reflecting and then refining and then, continue to put it into practice and do it all over again? So
Unconsciously would be the answer to that. That's how we grow, unconsciously.
True, yeah.
That's how you end up not being able to fit into the jeans that you could wear 5 years ago, because unconsciously you've been stuffing it in and it just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, and there's some extreme examples that I probably won't share, might trigger and create some shadow work for them. So I'll hold myself back from doing that to people and potentially creating my own shadow work in the process. Ben, thank you so much again, mate, for connecting on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. I just so enjoy having these going on these explorations with you. Is there any final messages that you want to share with the listeners? Anything arising with your awareness? And then please share where people can find you and connect with you. And if you have any offerings or anything you want to share with the people, throw them out there.
Thank you. So the two, when you asked that question, then the two things that came up in me all of a sudden were actually things that come from Bill Hicks. He's my favorite dead comedian. He's been dead now for nearly 30 years, which is mental. And one of the things that he used to say is love all the people, no matter who they are, love them all. And the other thing that I really loved that came from some of his very last work before he died was, remember, this is all a ride, and he did this whole beautiful sketch. You can go find it on YouTube. It's just a ride, and he's talking about how life is like a roller coaster. It's ups, it's downs, it's sideways, and sometimes it's really scary, and we forget that it's a ride. And sometimes people come along and they try and remind us, hey, don't worry, it's just a ride. But what do? We kill those people. Shut them up. We've got a lot invested in the ride. Look at how I'm worrying. Look at my bank account. I don't want to know this is a ride. But it doesn't matter because it's just a ride. So love all the people. It's all good. And so those are my kind of final thoughts. Just keep on doing your little bit every day, and keep on going. And even on the days where you want to rest, you're doing rest. Don't see it as a cop-out or a laziness or whatever. You're still making the choices that are right for you in that point, but keep going. Just get up and keep going. And offerings, come and join me for Qigong sometime. You want to feel your body, you want to integrate in your stuff, you can connect to it on my website through my event stuff, which, bencolder.co.uk is where you find that. And lovely, you can see my name on the screen, so you can get the spelling right. It's nice and easy. You can also find me on Facebook at Ben Calder Integral Health. You can find me on Instagram, Benji Calder, Twitter, Benji Calder, LinkedIn, Ben Calder Integral Health. So
you're not on TikTok yet, Ben?
I don't. There's enough platforms. I'm just wanting to get to grips with Zion at the moment. With JP Sears it's a decentralized platform, so we stop being the products on there. We're just the creators. It's a very different social media sphere to get into. But no TikTok for me. It's one platform too many.
TikTok's the new television. That shit is wild. With the Qigong, are people able to join us? Does it have to be in person, or is
No. So my classes are live streamed, so you can join in twice a week with me and come and do practice wherever you are in the world. So
I have to join you. I'll pop in depending on the times. I'll have to.
Yeah, sure.
I might be doing Qigong at 5:30 in the morning, but that's all right. Definitely worth it.
Idea.
Good way to start the day. So
not bad way,
yeah. Ben, again, just thank you so much. And as you know, just a whole lot of love and reverence for you, mate. And who knows, maybe we'll do another one again in the future.
Always happy to. Thank you, Lachlan. It's always an honor, always a pleasure. And again, really grateful for your work. Keep on putting this stuff out there, because it's the love and support that come from that desire in your heart that adds value into the work, so into the world. Keep it up.
Will
Thank
do,
you.
mate. Absolutely. And people, thank you so much for the support. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I love you guys so much, and I will see you on the next episode. Have a beautiful day. See you later.